Welcome to the Pursuit Chronicles, where tales of adventure, discovery, and passion unfold through every inspiring journey. The worn wooden staff looked like a relic, its surface polished smooth by decades of handling, out of place among the carbon fiber. Weapons and sensor-laden gear of Apex Strike, Chicago's most exclusive martial arts dojo. Javier Morales, a man in his late 50s with gray-streaked hair and a slight limp, stood quietly in the center of the polished hardwood floor. His faded jacket and work boots contrasted sharply with the designer GI worn by the dojo's elite students, each outfit costing more than Javier's monthly rent. Marcus Kane, the dojo's owner and a former MMA champion, leaned against a wall, his muscular frame barely contained by a tailored black GI. His smirk was sharp, his eyes glinting with amusement as he nudged his top student, a tech mogul named Derek Voss. Whispers rippled through the room, a mix of curiosity and condescension. Javier was an easy mark, the perfect setup for a laugh. No, one noticed how Javier's calloused hands adjusted his grip with surgical precision, or how his dark eyes scanned the room, cataloging every exit, every potential threat, with a calm that bordered on predatory. They couldn't know what classified files, buried deep in encrypted vaults, had erased 2 decades ago, that this unassuming immigrant had neutralized more high-value targets than any operative in covert history. "Old man with a stick," a voice muttered from the crowd. Javier heard it clearly, his expression unchanged. After years of silence, it was time to remind them what happens when you mock a shadow. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Apex Strike, its sleek glass and steel facade, reflecting the Chicago skyline. A battered pickup truck, its paint chipped and rust creeping along the edges, pulled into a space among gleaming Teslas and BMWs. Behind the wheel, Javier Morales exhaled slowly, his hands steady, despite the faint ache in his knees. He adjusted his jacket, its seams fraying but clean, and glanced at his niece, Elena, in the passenger seat. At 24, Elena was a law student with a fire for justice, her dark curls pulled back, her eyes bright with purpose. She clutched a notebook. Her latest project scrawled across its pages, a paper on class disparities in elite recreational spaces. "Are you sure about this, Tio Javier?" Elena asked, her voice tinged with concern. "This place has a reputation. They're not exactly welcoming to outsiders." Javier offered a faint smile, the kind that had always reassured her as a child. "I'm just here to help with your project, mija. Don't worry about me." Elena frowned but nodded, stepping out of the truck. Javier followed, his worn canvas bag slung over one shoulder, the staff inside clinking softly against a spare water bottle. The dojo loomed ahead, its entrance flanked by digital billboards showcasing Marcus Kane's victories, cage fights, endorsements, a grinning photo of him with a senator. Membership started at $30,000 a year, a fact Elena had uncovered, while securing guest passes through her university's legal aid network. She'd pitched the visit as research, but Javier sensed her deeper motive, to challenge the exclusivity of places like this, to expose their gatekeeping. Inside, the air was sharp with the scent of sweat, wax, and expensive cologne. Display cases lined the walls, showcasing trophies, custom katanas, and bow staffs embedded with sensors that tracked force and speed. Students milled about, a mix of tech entrepreneurs, off-duty cops, and minor celebrities, their conversations laced with the casual arrogance of wealth. Heads turned as Javier and Elena entered, the hum of chatter dipped, then resumed with subtle glances their way. "Well, who do we have here?" boomed a voice from across the lobby. Marcus Kane strode forward, his presence commanding, his tailored G emblazoned with the Apex Strike logo. At 38, he was a force. 6'2", all muscle, with a shaved head, and a grin that didn't reach his hazel eyes. He extended a hand to Elena, his grip firm but dismissive. "The law student, I presume. Elena Torres, right?" "Morales," Elena corrected, her tone polite but firm. "And this is my uncle, Javier." Marcus's gaze flicked to Javier, taking in the faded jacket, the weathered bag, the unassuming posture. "And you're +1? His voice carried a hint of mockery, drawing chuckles from the gathering crowd. Elena squared her shoulders. My uncle's a martial arts enthusiast. I thought he'd enjoy seeing your setup while I work on my paper about accessibility in high-end training spaces. Marcus's eyebrow arched, his amusement plain. Enthusiast, huh? His eyes settled on Javier's bag. What's in the relic, Pops? Got a magic wand in there? Family heirloom, Javier said softly, his accent subtle but unmistakable, a trace of his Guatemalan roots. His voice was calm, almost too calm, and it seemed to unsettle Marcus for a fleeting moment. Before Javier could elaborate, the crowd pressed closer. Students, trainers, a few VIP guests, all smelling blood in the water. That's a bow staff, right? Derek Voss asked, his pristine GI rustling as he crossed his arms. My grandfather had one. Used it to herd goats back in Montana. Laughter erupted, sharp and mean. It's a quarter-Q quarterstaff, Javier corrected quietly, his voice steady. Handmade, 1978. He unzipped the bag, revealing the staff, 6 feet of polished hardwood, unadorned, its surface worn smooth by years of use. The crowd's laughter grew louder, a ripple of derision. Marcus clapped his hands, silencing the room. All right, Pops, we've got state-of-the-art gear here. Motion sensors, VR sparring sims, AI trainers. Maybe you'd be more comfortable, watching from the lounge. Wouldn't want you pulling a muscle. Javier's face remained neutral, his dark eyes unreadable. I'd like to try, if that's okay, the room stilled. Who let Grandpa into the cage? A voice called from the back, loud enough to carry. Elena's eyes flashed with anger, her fists clenching, but Javier's hand on her arm stopped her. He nodded politely, his calm unnerving Marcus more than any retort could have. Your call, old man, Marcus said, shrugging. We're running a sparring contest today. Let's head to the main mat. The group moved to the dojo's central training area, a sprawling space with cushion mats and digital screens displaying strike accuracy, force metrics, and speed. Students wore sensor-lined gear that tracked every move, their data streaming to a leaderboard. The setup was cutting-edge, designed to quantify skill in ways Javier's simple staff couldn't. One by one, the elite took their turns. Derek Voss landed 6 out of 10 strikes on a moving dummy with a $2,000 carbon fiber bow, his form polished but predictable. A retired detective scored 7, his experience showing. Marcus stepped up with a prototype staff from his Apex brand, its sensors, syncing with the dojo's AI to hit 9 out of 10 targets at high speed. Not bad for a has-been, he quipped, basking in the crowd's applause. Then he gestured to Javier. Let's see what Grandpa's got. Elena leaned close, her voice low. You don't have to do this, Tio. They're setting you up. No, Javier replied, his tone even. He opened his bag, withdrawing the quarterstaff with a reverence that silenced the room for a moment. It was beautiful in its simplicity. No electronics, no sensors, just wood worn smooth by decades of handling. The crowd's jeers resumed as he checked its balance, his movements fluid, almost ritualistic. He stepped onto the mat, facing a course of moving targets, dummies that darted on tracks, simulating combat unpredictability. We've got a pool going, Marcus announced, his voice carrying. $5,000 says he trips over his own stick. Laughter followed, but Javier didn't react. He stood still, staff at his side, eyes tracking the targets with a focus that made the air feel heavier. His breathing slowed, visible in the rise, and fall of his chest. 10 seconds passed. 15. The crowd shifted, restless, their mockery faltering. Then a single strike, faster than the sensors could fully register. The crack of wood on target echoed like a gunshot. The screen flashed. Perfect hit, 100% force accuracy, 0.02-second response. The room froze. Before anyone could speak, Javier spun the staff, striking again. Another perfect hit. The targets accelerated, darting erratically. Fluke, Derek muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Javier adjusted his stance, aiming at a secondary target that veered left. His staff blurred, hitting it dead center, then redirecting to clip 2 more in a single, seamless motion. The screens struggled to keep up, registering 3 perfect strikes in under a second. Silence fell, thick and heavy. Javier lowered his staff, his breathing steady. his face unchanged. "Thank you for the chance," he said softly, his voice carrying in the stunned space. He turned and walked toward the exit, the crowd parting instinctively. Elena followed, her shock mirrored in her wide eyes. "Where did you learn that?" she asked as they reached the parking lot, the dojo's glass doors closing behind them. Javier's eyes held a distant weight, a shadow of something Elena had never seen before. "Long time ago," he said simply. "Let's go." Behind them, Marcus Kane watched through the glass, his face tight with something deeper than irritation. A flicker of recognition, perhaps fear. He pulled out his phone, dialing a number he hadn't used in years. "It's him," he said, his voice low. "Shades back." The drive to Javier's apartment was quiet, the city's hum a distant backdrop to Elena's racing thoughts. She kept glancing at her uncle, seeing him anew. His modest one-bedroom in a working-class neighborhood revealed nothing extraordinary. Family photos on a shelf, a worn armchair, a small balcony with potted herbs. Nothing to suggest the man who'd just silenced a room of elite fighters with a stick older than most of them. "I'll make coffee," Javier said, hanging his jacket on a hook by the door. "Tio," Elena started, setting her backpack on the table. What happened back there? Nobody moves like that without serious training. That was unreal. Javier filled the kettle, his movements deliberate, precise. "You wanted contrast for your paper. You got it." "That's not what I mean, and you know it." Elena sat, her voice firm. "That was military-grade skill, maybe more." Javier's hands paused on the coffee tin. For a moment, his face betrayed a flicker of something. Memory, perhaps pain. "Everyone has a past, mija," he said finally. "Mine's just quieter than most. Guatemala, 1975. The jungle air clung like a second skin as 9-year-old Javier balanced on a fallen log, clutching a stick his father, Miguel, had carved from a fallen mahogany tree. Miguel, lean and weathered from years as a farmer, adjusted. His son's grip. "Like this, pequeño. Feel the weight, not just in your hands, but in your whole body." Javier nodded, his small frame mimicking his father's stance. "Breathe with the move," Miguel said. "The weapon isn't separate from you. It's you." Javier swung at a rope target hanging from a ceiba tree, missing at first, then connecting with a soft thud. "I did it, Papa," he beamed, his grin wide. "You did?" Miguel said, ruffling his hair. "But listen, Javier, this isn't a game. It's a responsibility. You don't raise a weapon unless you're ready to protect something that matters." Javier nodded solemnly. "Never." "Pointed at anything you don't intend to protect," Miguel's eyes softened. "That's right. I pray you only ever need it for targets and games, but the world, it's not always kind." Back in the present, Javier poured coffee, the steam curling between them like a veil. "Papa taught me when I was young," he offered, sitting across from Elena. He was patient, knew the old ways of bojutsu from his own father. Elena sipped her coffee, her eyes narrowing. "But what I saw today wasn't just old-school stick fighting. That was something else, beyond anything I've ever seen." Javier leaned back, his hands resting on the table. "I trained. You know that. You said you were a mechanic in the Guatemalan army. Fixed trucks, retired after 15 years. That's what you told us! That's what my papers say." His tone carried a weight that made Elena's pulse quicken. "What aren't you telling me?" she pressed, her journalist instincts flaring. Javier rose, moving to a locked drawer. In the corner, he pulled out a faded photograph and handed it to her. It showed a teenage Javier, maybe 16, standing in a rural training camp holding a staff, his face serious, a medal pinned to his shirt. A clipped headline read, "Local boy wins national bojutsu tournament, stuns judges." "That day changed everything," Javier said, sitting again. "A man came after the tournament, said I had talent that shouldn't be wasted. Guatemala, 1983. The national tournament buzzed with spectators in a dusty arena outside Guatemala City. 17-year-old Javier stood out, the only competitor from his small village, his clothes patched but clean. "You sure you belong here, kid?" a rival asked, eyeing his worn shoes. Javier just nodded, stepping onto the mat. The matches were grueling, precision strikes against moving targets, sparring with seasoned fighters, a final round requiring blindfolded accuracy. When scores were tallied, the announcer's voice cracked, with surprise. First place, Javier Morales, 95 out of 100. As Javier accepted a modest medal, a man in a crisp suit approached. Captain Luis Vargas, he introduced himself, his posture rigid. That was exceptional. The military could use someone like you. We have programs to hone what you can do. Javier hesitated, the medal heavy in his hand. His village offered little, a life of farming, maybe a job in the city if he was lucky. 3 months later, with his family struggling and no clear path forward, he called the number Vargas had given him. Elena set down her mug, the photo still in her hand. So you joined because of your skill? Partly, Javier said. But also because I wanted more than what a poor kid from Guatemala could expect in the 80s. I thought I could help, make a difference. He fell silent, his gaze distant. Elena sensed a story far bigger than she'd imagined. What happened after you enlisted? Training, more training, then a special unit. They didn't call it what it was for people like me. Special unit? Elena pulled out her notebook, her pen poised. What kind? Javier's eyes met hers, a storm brewing behind them. The kind that didn't exist, not on paper. Over the next week, Elena dove into research, leveraging her legal aid contacts and digging through military archives. Javier's records were sparse, entire years summarized in vague sentences. Commendations were noted but redacted, their details classified. His last assignment, a base called Camp Escondido, didn't appear on any official lists, its name absent from every database she checked. She found a single reference in a declassified memo mentioning Escondido as a training site for non-standard operations, but nothing more. When she presented her findings to Javier, sitting at his kitchen table with papers spread out, he wasn't surprised. They were thorough, he said, his voice low. Had to be. Who's they? Elena pressed, her frustration mounting. What were you part of, Tio? Javier stared out the window, the Chicago skyline, a distant haze. Ever heard of Phantom Blade? Elena shook her head, her pen pausing. Good. That means they did their job. His voice took on a new edge, sharp and deliberate. Phantom Blade was a unit that didn't exist. Soldiers who didn't exist doing things that never happened. Extractions, sabotage, eliminations, missions too sensitive for regular forces. Elena's breath caught. A Black Ops unit? More than that, Javier said. We were the ones they couldn't acknowledge. Latinos mostly, some others. People who didn't fit the mold of traditional special forces. Our existence broke their rules, but our skills were too valuable to ignore. Colombia, 1985. Javier stood at attention in a jungle clearing, the only Latino in a covert training group of 12. The instructors were shadows, their names never given, their faces hard. Despite outscoring most of his peers in hand-to-hand combat and weapons drills, Javier was sidelined, assigned to equipment maintenance until Colonel Ana Rivera, a stern woman with a scar across her cheek, pulled him aside after a qualification test. Morales, your skills are a problem, she said, her voice low. They don't know what to do with someone like you. Ma'am? Javier asked, his posture rigid. A Latino kid with your talent breaks their neat categories. Some want you fixing trucks forever, but others see what I see. She studied him, her gaze piercing. There's an unofficial path, dangerous, invisible, but your skills would be used fully. Interested? Javier thought of his father's words. Protect what matters. Will it help people, ma'am? Rivera nodded slowly. In ways most can't. Then I'm in. Phantom Blade operated globally, Javier told Elena, his voice steady but heavy. We went where politics or optics stopped others. Hostage rescues in places no one could admit we were, sabotage of enemy supply lines, eliminations of targets too high profile for public acknowledgement. How many missions? Elena asked, her pen flying across the page. Classified. For how long? 18 years. Elena looked up, her eyes wide. 18 years of invisible missions, no recognition, no medals. That was the deal, Javier said, his jaw tightening. Until it wasn't. Before Elena could press further, her phone pinged with an incoming email. The subject line was blank. The body contained a single attachment, a grainy photo of a younger Javier in jungle fatigues, disarming a cartel enforcer with a staff, a burning compound in the background. His face was calm, lethal, his movements a blur of precision. "What is this?" Elena whispered, turning the phone toward Javier. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. "Panama, 1998. Classified op. Hostage extraction gone sideways." He studied the image, his voice dropping. "Someone's breaking silence. That's dangerous." "Who'd send this? Why now?" Javier took the phone, zooming in on the photo. "Someone's sending a message, and they know where to find me." Across town, in a penthouse office overlooking Lake Michigan, Marcus Kane sat at a glass desk reviewing footage from the dojo. He paused on a frame of Javier mid-strike, the staff a blur, the target shattered. "Run his face again," he ordered. His security chief, a former mercenary named Holt Morales Javier. "Retired mechanic, Guatemalan Army, 2005. "Nothing special," Holt said, glancing at his tablet. Marcus slammed the desk, the glass rattling. "Nobody moves like that fixing trucks. Cross-reference with Operation Nightshade. Call sign Shade." Holt hesitated, his fingers pausing on the tablet. "Those files are sealed, sir. Pentagon-level encryption." "Do it!" Marcus snapped, his eyes locked on the screen. He froze the footage on Javier's face, the moment of his impossible strike. "I know who you are, Shade," he whispered, "and I'm going to bury you." That night, as Javier prepared dinner in his small kitchen, an envelope slid under his front door. No postmark, no return address. Inside was a single splinter from a bow staff, its grain matching his own, and a handwritten note. "You're not." The only one they erased, Javier's hands, steady at the dojo, trembled slightly as he held the splinter. "Who is it?" Elena asked, stepping into the room, her eyes wide at the envelope. "Someone from the past," Javier said quietly, tucking the splinter and note into his pocket. "Someone who knows what's coming." "What's coming?" Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Javier turned to the window, the city lights a distant glow. "War," he said simply. "The kind fought in shadows." The Chicago skyline glittered beyond Javier Morales' small apartment window, a stark contrast to the tension coiling in the room. Javier stood at the kitchen counter, his weathered hands steady as he cleaned his quarterstaff, its wood gleaming under the dim light. The splinter from the anonymous envelope lay beside it, a jagged reminder of a past he'd buried. Elena, his niece, sat at the table, her laptop open, her law student's instincts driving her to dig deeper into the grainy Panama photo and the note. "You're not the only one they erased." Her fingers paused over the keyboard, her eyes flicking. To Javier. "Tio, we need to talk about this," she said, her voice firm but edged with worry. "Someone's targeting you. That splinter, the photo, it's not random." Javier didn't look up, his cloth moving methodically along the staff. "I know, mija. It's a message, but not the kind you answer in a hurry." Before Elena could press, a sharp knock interrupted. Javier's hand stilled, his body tensing, like a coiled spring. He gestured for silence, moving soundlessly to the door, his staff in hand. Through the peephole he saw a delivery worker, but the man's posture, too rigid, eyes scanning the hall, set off alarms. Javier opened the door a crack, keeping the chain on. "Package for Morales," the man said, holding a gold-embossed envelope. Javier took it, his eyes never leaving the man's face. The delivery worker left quickly, his steps too measured for a civilian. Javier shut the door, locking it twice. Elena stood, her notebook abandoned. "What is it?" Javier opened. The envelope revealing an invitation on heavy cardstock, the Apex Strike logo embossed in silver. It read, "Heroes Combat Showcase, Honoring Veterans. Special guest, Javier Morales. Saturday, 7 p.m., Kane Training Compound." A handwritten note from Marcus Kane added, "Let's make amends for the other day. Show the world what you've got. Elena's eyes narrowed. This is a trap, Tio. After what happened at the dojo, Kane's not inviting you out of kindness. Javier set the invitation down, his expression unreadable. Probably not. But traps work both ways. Guatemala, 1987. The jungle swallowed sound, leaving only the hum of insects and the drip of rain. Javier, now 21, crouched in a clearing, his bow staff balanced across his knees. Across from him stood Colonel Ana Rivera, her scar stark against her tanned skin. She held a similar staff, her stance loose but lethal. "Again, Morales," she barked. "You're fast, but speed without control is a death sentence." Javier nodded, rising. They circled, staffs clacking in a blur of strikes and parries. Rivera was relentless, her attacks probing for weakness. Javier blocked, his movements fluid, but a misstep left him open. Her staff grazed his ribs, a bruising lesson. "You're holding back," Rivera said, lowering her weapon. "Why?" Javier wiped sweat from his brow. "My father taught me never to aim a weapon unless I mean to protect something." Rivera's eyes softened, but her voice stayed hard. "In Phantom Blade, you'll protect more than you can imagine. But you'll need to be more than a village boy with a stick. Next mission's in Panama. Hostage extraction, high-value target." "You're on point." Javier's pulse quickened. "Who's the target?" "Classified, but the intel's from a contractor named Marcus Kane. Ex-Marine, runs logistics for us. Don't trust him. He's in it for the paycheck." The Heroes. Combat Showcase was a spectacle, held at Marcus Kane's private training compound on Chicago's outskirts. Red, white, and blue banners draped the entrance. Sponsors' logos, energy drinks, tech firms, Kane's Apex brand plastered across every surface. Floodlights bathed the arena, a high-tech octagon with sensors embedded in the mats, cameras, capturing every angle for a global live stream. Influential guests mingled, politicians, military contractors, influencers with millions of followers. The air buzzed with anticipation, but to Javier it smelled of ambition and deceit. Elena, dressed in a blazer to blend with the press, clutched her recorder, her eyes scanning for threats. "You sure about this, Tio?" she whispered as they approached the entrance. Javier adjusted his jacket, the staff in its canvas bag slung over his shoulder. "Kane wants a show. Let's see what kind." Marcus greeted them at the gate, his tailored suit replacing his GI, his grin all charm. "Mr. Morales, honored you made it." His handshake was too firm, his eyes lingering on Javier's bag. "And Elena, our budding journalist. Got your scoop ready?" Elena forced a smile. "Working on it." Marcus led them inside, gesturing to an aide. "We'd like to present you with this, Javier." The aide handed him a polished wooden box. Inside was a trophy, its plaque reading, "For participation." Cameras flashed, capturing the moment. Elena caught the subtle dig in the wording, her jaw tightening. "Now," Marcus continued, "we'd love for you to demonstrate your unique style." A technician stepped forward, offering a sleek, high-tech staff, its surface embedded with sensors and a digital display. "Our latest Apex model. Tracks force, speed, accuracy. Try it." Javier tested its weight, his fingers tracing the shaft. It was heavier than his own, its balance off, but he nodded. "Too kind." "Nothing but the best," Marcus said, his smile sharp. The arena was a marvel. Moving targets on hydraulic tracks, drones simulating opponents, screens projecting real-time metrics. The crowd hushed as Javier stepped into the octagon, the tech staff in his hand. Elena's instinct screamed warning, Marcus's smirk, the technicians' glances, the way the cameras zoomed in. Javier raised the staff, aimed at a darting target, and struck. The staff veered, missing wildly. The crowd murmured. He adjusted, struck again. Another miss, the screen flashing, 0% accuracy. Laughter spread, tentative at first, then bold. Marcus leaned forward, his grin widening. "Maybe our tech's too advanced for you, Pops." Javier's face remained neutral, but his fingers probed the staff's sensors. To the crowd, he looked lost, struggling with unfamiliar tech. But Elena saw the flicker in his eyes, recognition. He lowered the staff, stepping back. "Thank you for the opportunity," he said, his voice calm, and walked out, the crowd's jeers following. In the parking lot, Elena fumed. "He rigged it, didn't he? That staff was sabotaged. Javier nodded, climbing into the truck. Weights off, sensors miscalibrated. It was meant to fail. We should expose him. Elena pulled out her phone, ready to draft a post. Not yet, Javier said, starting the engine. Let them laugh. Pride blinds. That night, the footage went viral. Clips of Javier's failure spread across social media, captioned with mockery. Grandpa tries high-tech and flops. Apex Strike's stock ticked up. Kane's brand hailed as untouchable. In his penthouse, Marcus replayed the footage, his satisfaction tempered by unease. His security chief, Holt, stood by, a tablet in hand. "Mission accomplished, sir," Holt said. "His rep's toast. No one's talking about his dojo stunt anymore." Marcus shook his head, pausing the video. On Javier's face the moment he lowered the staff. "This is step one. If he's Shade, this won't stop him." "Who do you think he is?" Holt asked, skeptical. Marcus pulled up a classified file, its edges redacted. "In '99, I worked security for a cartel sting in Panama. Heard of a guy call sign Shade. Took out 6 enforcers alone, no firearms, just a staff. They said he didn't exist, but I saw the bodies. Same moves, same calm." "You think this old man is him?" "I think he's the deadliest fighter alive," Marcus said, his voice low, "and exposing him will make Apex the biggest name in combat tech." Javier's apartment was dark when they returned, the city's hum a distant pulse. Elena sat at the table, her research spread out. Military records, the Panama photo, a new lead, a retired CIA officer, William Brandt, whose name appeared in Apex's early funding documents. Brandt died in 2010, but his signature was on Elena's guest pass application, suggesting someone used his name to lure them to the dojo. "Tio, this goes deeper than Kane," Elena said, pointing to the documents. "Brandt was tied to covert ops in the 90s. If he's connected to Phantom Blade, Kane might be a front for something bigger." Javier nodded, his staff resting against the wall. "Kane's not the mastermind. He's a pawn who thinks he's a king." Before Elena could respond, Javier's phone buzzed. An encrypted message from an unknown number. It read, "Shade, you're marked. 10 million bounty, Kane's orders. Meet me. Wisconsin, 48 hours. Drift." Attached was a photo of a BO staff splinter, identical to the one under Javier's door. "Drift?" Elena asked, reading over his shoulder. "Carlos Vega," Javier said, his voice heavy. "My spotter in Phantom Blade. Officially, KIA Panama 1998. If he's alive, things just got complicated." The safe house was a cabin in Wisconsin's dense woods, its location known only to Phantom Blade survivors. Javier drove through the night, Elena asleep in the passenger seat, her notebook clutched to her chest. The cabin was modest, its exterior weathered, but inside was a fortress, reinforced walls, encrypted comms, a hidden compartment beneath the floor. Javier opened it, revealing weapons, maps, and dossiers labeled with call signs: Ghost, Raven, Drift, Shade. Elena woke as Javier spread the dossiers on a table. "Your team?" she asked, her voice hushed. "The ones they erased," Javier said, his fingers tracing Drift's file. "Carlos was the best spotter I knew. If he's alive, he's been hiding for a reason." He opened a file marked Panama 1998, its pages yellowed but intact. "This is where it went wrong. Kane was our liaison, feeding intel from a cartel informant. Said it was a clean extraction, hostages in a compound, light security. We went in blind." Panama 1998. The compound was a fortress, not the lightly guarded outpost Kane described. Javier, callsign Shade, led the team. Drift on comms, Ghost on explosives, Raven on overwatch. The hostages were real, aid workers caught in a cartel. Feud. But the security was military grade, with tripwires and snipers. Kane's intel was a lie designed to protect a cartel ally. Shade were blown, Drift hissed through the comms as gunfire erupted. "Kane sold us out," Javier's staff blurred, neutralizing 2 guards in seconds. "Get the hostages, I'll hold the line." Against orders, Javier redirected the team, saving the hostages but exposing Phantom Blade's existence. The mission succeeded, but the cost was high. Ghost was wounded, Raven vanished, and Drift was reported KIA. Javier was debriefed, reassigned, and buried under a mechanic's cover. The safe house sensors beeped at dawn, snapping Javier to attention. "Bunker now," he told Elena, guiding her to a hidden trapdoor. She descended as he armed himself, a staff, a suppressed pistol, a knife. Outside, 3 mercenaries approached, their movements professional, their gear cutting edge. Javier moved like a ghost, using the trees for cover. The fight was silent. A neck snap, a throat slit, a staff strike to a temple. 3 bodies lay still in under a minute. He returned to the cabin, a scratch on his cheek, the only sign of conflict. Elena emerged, pale but resolute. "Kane's men?" Javier nodded, cleaning his knife. "He's escalating. Time to take the fight to him." "How?" Elena asked, her voice steady despite her fear. Javier opened a map of Kane's compound, marked for an upcoming global expo. "We infiltrate during his big show. He wants to expose Shade. I'll give him what he wants, on my terms?" The splinter lay on the table, a promise and a warning. Javier picked it up, his eyes hard. "Drift's out there. If he's with us, we end this. If he's not, we end him too." The Wisconsin woods were silent, the safe house a fortress of secrets. Javier Morales stood in the cabin's main room, his quarterstaff leaning against a wall, its splintered twin, a gift from Drift, resting on a table beside maps and dossiers. Elena sat at her laptop, drafting a novel, Shade in the Shadows, fictionalizing her uncle's story to spread the truth without exposing him. The words flowed, a blend of fact and myth, painting Shade as a ghost who struck from the dark to protect the forgotten. She paused, glancing at Javier, who was studying a blueprint of Marcus Kane's training compound. "Tio, this book, it's already getting traction," Elena said, her voice a mix of pride and worry. "Veteran forums are buzzing. They're calling Shade a legend, but some think it's real. What if it draws the wrong attention?" Javier's eyes didn't leave the blueprint. "It will, mija. That's the point. Kane's watching. Let him chase a ghost." Colombia, 1992. Javier, now 26, moved through a cartel safe house, his staff a blur in the moonlight. Phantom Blade's mission was simple: eliminate a trafficker funding insurgents. The team was tight: Drift on comms, Ghost rigging exits, Raven scouting. Javier's strikes were surgical, the target down in seconds, his guards unaware until it was too late. Back at base, Colonel Rivera debriefed them, her voice clipped. "Clean work, Shade, but whispers are spreading. A senator's asking questions about ghost units. We can't afford leaks." Javier nodded, his face impassive. "Understood, ma'am." Rivera studied him. "You're too good, Morales. That's the problem. People notice perfection. Keep your head down or they'll bury you." A knock at the safehouse door snapped Javier to attention. He signaled Elena to the bunker, gripping his staff. Through a hidden camera, he saw a man. In a worn jacket, his face shadowed but familiar. Javier opened the door, staff ready. "Drift," he said, his voice low. Carlos Vega, call sign Drift, stepped inside, older but unmistakable, lean, sharp-eyed, a scar across his knuckles. "Shade," he said, a faint smile breaking through. "You're supposed to be dead." "So are you," Javier replied, lowering his staff but not his guard. Elena emerged, her eyes wide. "You're Carlos?" Drift nodded, setting a duffel bag on the floor. "You must be Elena. Heard you're stirring the pot with that book." He pulled out a tablet displaying schematics of Kane's AI combat trainer, a humanoid drone designed to outfight any human. "Kane's planning to unveil this at his expo. It's programmed to hunt you, Shade." Javier studied the schematics, his mind racing. Sensor arrays the weak point. Overload it, and it freezes. Drift raised an eyebrow. "You've seen this tech before." "Prototype 999, Javier said. "I corrupted its code during Panama. Kane doesn't know." Over the next 2 days, Javier and Drift trained in the woods, their staffs clashing in a dance of precision and power. Elena watched, transcribing their stories for her novel, each anecdote revealing more of Phantom Blade's cost. Drift spoke of Maria Delgado, call sign Ghost, who died in a rigged explosion post-Panama. Javier recounted James Wilson, call sign Raven, who vanished after questioning orders. They erased us, Javier said, his voice heavy. Not just records, lives. Elena's research deepened, her legal aid contacts yielding a breakthrough. A meeting with Major Carla Ortiz, a retired intelligence officer who'd served with Rivera. They met in Lincoln Park, Ortiz's posture still military straight at 65. I'm here because if Javier Morales is back, people need warning, Ortiz said, her eyes scanning the park. Warning about what? Elena asked, her recorder hidden. Your? Uncle is the most lethal operative I ever saw, Ortiz said. Phantom Blade was a necessity, but it broke rules. Kane was a contractor in Panama, feeding bad intel to protect a cartel ally. When Shade saved those hostages, he exposed Kane's betrayal. That's why they shut us down. Who's they? Elena pressed. Ortiz's voice dropped. Contractors, senators, people who profit from shadows. Kane's hunting Shade, to prove he's untouchable. Tell Javier, if he's Shade, he's deadlier than anyone Kane's faced. Unseen, a man in a baseball cap lingered nearby, his earpiece active. She surfaced, he whispered into a burner phone. And Kane's hunting her! Kane's expo loomed, its timeline accelerated. Javier and Drift analyzed the AI trainer's weaknesses, identifying its reliance on thermal and motion sensors. Javier rigged a decoy, a heated mannequin, to test its tracking. At dusk, a drone descended, its cameras locking onto the decoy. Javier moved silently, planting a signal jammer in its path. The drone froze, crashing into a tree. Back at the safe house, Javier examined its wreckage. Kane's tech is advanced but predictable. He's betting on machines, not skill. Elena's phone pinged with another anonymous email, a photo of Javier in the woods, crosshairs over his head, captioned, I missed on purpose. Javier's jaw tightened. Kane's taunting us. He responded with a calculated move, infiltrating Kane's estate under cover of night. Using a silenced drone, he dropped a bowstaff splinter in Kane's garden, attached to a note. I haven't started. The message was clear. Shade was coming. The safe house became a war room. Elena's novel spread online, its excerpts trending in military circles. Veterans debated Shade's existence, some calling it fiction, others swearing they'd seen him in action. The buzz drew attention, forcing Javier to tighten security. Sensors picked up a vehicle at midnight, but it was Ortiz, her face grim. Kane's got a mole in my network, she said, handing Javier a USB drive. This has names, surviving Phantom Blade operatives, their locations. Protect them. Javier nodded, his eyes hard. What's Kane's endgame? He wants to kill Shade live at the expo, Ortiz said. Prove his AI can beat the unbeatable. The bounty's up to 15 million. Drift leaned forward. Then we crash his party, expose him before he pulls the trigger. The part ended with Javier standing outside, staff in hand, striking. A tin can 50 feet away. It split cleanly, the sound sharp in the night. Elena watched, her novel open on her laptop, the words a promise. Shade would not stay buried. The Kane training compound buzzed with anticipation, its expo a global event drawing military contractors, tech moguls, and media. Floodlights illuminated. A massive arena, its octagon rigged with AI drones and holographic displays. Marcus Kane stood on a stage, his tailored suit gleaming, his voice booming through speakers. Apex Strike isn't just training, it's the future of combat. Behind him, the AI combat trainer, a sleek humanoid drone, moved with eerie precision, its sensors glowing red. Javier Morales slipped through the crowd, disguised as a security guard, his staff concealed in a maintenance bag. Elena, posing as a journalist, adjusted her press badge, a hidden camera in her glasses streaming to Drift, who monitored from a van outside. Their plan was precise. Access Kane's secure vault, where Phantom Blade's analog tapes, proof of their existence, were stored, and expose Kane's betrayal before he could kill Javier. Panama, 1999. Javier stood in a debriefing room, his fatigues bloodied, his staff leaning against a wall. Colonel Rivera faced him, her expression grim. You saved those hostages, Shade, but you broke protocol. The higher-ups want Phantom Blade gone. Javier's jaw tightened. Kane's intel was bad. He set us up. Rivera nodded. I know, but proving it means exposing the unit. They're erasing you. New identity, no record. You're a mechanic now. Disappear, or they'll make you.
Javier took the forged papers, his eyes hard. And the others? Ghost's dead. Raven's missing. Drift's body wasn't found. Get out while you can. The expo's energy was electric, the crowd cheering as Kane demonstrated the AI trainer, which neutralized a team of stunt fighters in seconds.
Elena mingled with reporters, slipping into a restricted hallway. Drift's voice crackled in her earpiece. Vaults on level B2. Guards rotate every 10 minutes. Move now. Javier navigated the service tunnels, his guard uniform blending.
Seamlessly. He reached the vault door, its biometric lock glowing. Drift hacked the system, feeding a looped feed to the cameras.
Javier slipped inside, finding shelves of tapes labeled with mission codes. Nightshade, Blackthorn, Phantom Blade. He pocketed the Panama tape, its grainy label a key to the truth. Above, Kane's presentation peaked. Our AI can defeat any fighter, past or present, he declared. Even legends. His eyes scanned the crowd, searching for Javier. Elena, back in the arena, uploaded the Panama footage to Drift, who prepped it for broadcast.
Her heart raced. Time was running out. Javier emerged from the vault, but an alarm blared. Guards converged, alerted by a silent trigger Kane had set. Javier moved like a shadow, his staff striking pressure points, leaving guards unconscious.
But alive. He reached the arena's control room, where Drift patched him into the system. Elena took the stage, posing as a tech assistant, and plugged a drive into the main console. The screens flickered, replacing Kane's promo with the Panama footage. Javier saving hostages, Kane's voice on intercepted comms ordering the ambush. The crowd gasped, military officials leaning forward, phones recording. Kane's face paled.
"Cut it!"
he shouted, but Drift's hack locked the system. Javier stepped into the arena, shedding his disguise. The AI trainer locked onto him, its sensors glowing.
"Override! Shade Alpha 7,
Javier said calmly. The drone froze, its lights dimming, his embedded code from 99 intact. Kane drew a combat knife, lunging.
Javier sidestepped, disarming him in a blur, the knife clattering across the mat. He pinned Kane, his staff at his throat. "You don't get to die easy," Javier said, binding him with zip ties. "You face the truth." FBI and military police
swarmed, alerted by Ortiz's contacts. Kane was dragged away, his empire crumbling. Javier faced the crowd, his voice steady. "I'm Javier Morales. Call sign Shade. Phantom Blade was real. We served in silence, but no more." The arena fell silent, cameras capturing the moment. Elena's camera glasses streamed it live, the world watching as Shade stepped out of the shadows. In the aftermath, Javier and Elena met Drift outside, the van a safe haven amid the chaos. "You did it," Drift said, clapping Javier's shoulder. "Kane's finished." "Not yet," Javier said, his eyes on the horizon. "The truth's out, but the fight's not over." Elena hugged him, tears in her eyes. "You're not a ghost anymore, Tio." Javier's smile was faint but real. "Maybe not, but ghosts don't rest easy." 3 months later, Chicago's streets were alive with spring, the city's pulse a backdrop to a new reality. Elena's novel, Shade in the Shadows, was a bestseller, its pages fueling debates in Congress and veteran halls. The book, a blend of Javier's truth and fictional flourish, had sparked the Shade Act, a proposed law to protect covert operatives from erasure. Javier Morales, once a ghost, was now a name whispered with reverence and controversy. Javier stood at Arlington National Cemetery, a modest memorial unveiled for Phantom Blade. Granite slabs bore the call signs of the fallen: Ghost, Raven, Thorn, Ember. Drift, now Carlos Vega again, stood beside him, his eyes tracing the names. "We made it, Shade," he said, his voice thick. "They're not forgotten." Javier placed Drift's bowstaff splinter at the memorial's base, its wood A. "Quiet tribute. No more shadows," he said softly. Guatemala, 2005. Javier, now a retired mechanic, returned to his village, his cover identity a shield. His father, Miguel, was frail, his hands trembling as he gripped Javier's. "You kept your promise," Miguel said, his voice weak. "You protected what matters," Javier nodded, his throat tight. "Always, Papa." Miguel handed him the quarterstaff, its wood still strong. Keep teaching, pequeño. The world needs men like you. Javier buried his father a month later, the staff his only inheritance.
He vowed to honor Miguel's lessons, not in war but in peace. Marcus Kane's trial was a media storm, broadcast globally. Javier testified, his voice steady, recounting Panama's betrayal and Phantom Blade's erasure. Kane, defiant, claimed he was a patriot, but the evidence, tapes, intercepted comms, Ortiz's testimony, buried him. He was sentenced to life, his empire dismantled. Javier watched him led away, feeling no victory, only pity for a man who served only himself. Apex Strike, now veteran-owned, became a community hub. Javier taught martial arts to at-risk youth, his classes free, his staff a symbol of discipline and hope. Among his students was Sofia, a 12-year-old Guatemalan immigrant with a quick smile and fierce determination. She reminded Javier of Elena at that age, her eyes bright with possibility. "Like this, Señor Javier?" Sofia asked, gripping a practice. Staff, her stance wobbly but earnest, Javier adjusted her grip, his voice gentle. "Feel the weight, Sofia. It's not just in your hands. It's in your heart." She swung at a target, missing, then tried again, clipping it. "I did it," she grinned. "You did," Javier said, ruffling her hair. "But remember, a weapon is a responsibility. Only raise it to protect what matters." Elena's book tour took her across the country, but she returned to Chicago for the memorial's dedication. The crowd included veterans, lawmakers, and families of the fallen. Javier spoke briefly, his words simple. Phantom Blade served in silence. This memorial ensures they're heard. A reporter approached, her microphone eager. "Mr. Morales, how does it feel to be known?" Javier looked at the granite slabs, the names etched forever. "Some wars end in silence. Mine ended when the world saw the truth." Years later, Javier restored his family's home in Guatemala, a modest house, surrounded by ceiba trees. He taught martial arts to village children, Sofia among them, now 16 and a skilled fighter. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows as Javier set up a rope target. "Ready, Sofia?" he asked, handing her a staff. She nodded, her stance confident. She swung, the staff cracking against the target, splitting it cleanly. "I did it!" she shouted, her grin wide. Javier smiled, the same smile he'd given his father decades ago. "You did, but never forget why we learned this." "To protect what matters," Sofia said, her voice firm. As the children dispersed, Javier stood alone, the staff in his hands. The jungle hummed, a reminder of his childhood, his father's lessons, the wars he'd fought. He was no longer Shade, the ghost who struck from the dark. He was Javier Morales, a mentor, a truth-teller, a man who'd turned shadows into light. Elena's book sat on a shelf in the house, its dedication simple, "To Tío Javier, who taught me the power of truth." Beside it was a photo of the Arlington Memorial, drift splinter, and a new staff carved for Sofia. Javier's legacy wasn't in the fights he'd won, but in the lives he'd shaped, the truth he'd revealed, and the peace he'd found. He looked at the horizon, the stars emerging. For the first time in decades, he felt whole. Thank you for joining the Pursuit Chronicles. Keep chasing your dreams and explore new horizons with us.